Every time I drag my finger across my phone screen, a pale green smear follows it through the air, fading slowly like smoke dissolving in wind. It hangs between me and the glass for a moment, waiting for my brain to catch up with my eyes. I have gotten used to it, most days, but tonight it is making me feel sick again. Typing is difficult. Autocorrect is doing most of the work. I have been searching online for the past 2 hours, scrolling through result after result and finding nothing useful. I even tried one of those AI chat tools. It told me that what I described was almost certainly a stress response, a hallucination produced by fatigue and neurological trauma, and that I should speak to a licensed medical professional. Even an algorithm thinks I have lost my mind. I am under my blankets. The room is dark. I'm sweating through my shirt, and it has nothing to do with temperature. I checked every corner of the room 10 minutes ago. Nothing is here. I have locked the door and blocked the gap at the bottom with a rolled towel. I have pushed the wardrobe against the window. My phone is the only light source. I need to write this down while I still can, while I am still thinking clearly enough to do it. My name is Rowan. I am 23 years old. I study marine biology at a coastal university in the north of the country. Until 14 months ago, I was a completely ordinary person, methodical, practical, not given to flights of imagination. My housemate Dara used to joke that I was the most boring person she had ever met, which I took as a compliment. I believed in observable evidence, in things you could measure and record. I no longer have the luxury of that belief. 14 months ago, I was in the water. Our department runs a mandatory open water fieldwork module in the second year. We were at a research station on a small island about 12 miles offshore. The day had been good, calm sea, clear visibility, perfect conditions for the reef survey we were conducting. I was the last diver in the water. I had stayed down an extra few minutes to photograph a cluster of sea anemones on the north face of the reef wall. I do not remember what happened next. I was told afterward. The current shifted, a hard, fast lateral pull that the surface team had not predicted. I was pushed sideways into the reef wall at considerable speed. The right side of my head connected with the coral at an angle that the attending neurologist later described, with what I can only call professional understatement, as significant. I was unconscious underwater for somewhere between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. The dive buddy protocol saved my life. My partner, a third-year student named Hemi, got to me before I could sink. The boat crew did the rest. I was airlifted to the mainland. I do not remember the helicopter or the hospital or the first 4 days. The first thing I clearly recall is lying in a white room with a tube in my arm, hearing my mother's voice. She said my name, just my name, and as she said it, the sound became visible. A slow arc of amber light that curved upward from her mouth and faded near the ceiling. I thought I was dreaming. The neurologist explained it to me the next day, using a diagram on a tablet screen. She was patient and thorough. The impact had caused bleeding in a specific region of the brain responsible for integrating sensory input. The damage was permanent. What had been disrupted was the clean separation between different sensory channels, the invisible sorting system that ensures you see things with your eyes and hear things with your ears, and that the two streams of information arrive labeled and filed correctly. Mine were no longer labeled. Imagine your brain as a communication center, she said, turning the tablet to show me a simplified diagram. Normally, signals arrive from your eyes and your ears through separate cables, and they get routed to separate processing areas. Your injury fused those cables. Now, when a signal comes in, the brain does not know where to send it, so it sends it everywhere. You will perceive sound as light. Movement will leave visual traces. Your world will be, to put it plainly, extraordinarily busy. She paused. It will be overwhelming at first. Most patients develop coping strategies over time. You will learn to filter. I asked her what the medical term for the condition was. She said it quietly as though it might frighten me. Synesthesia, she said, but not the mild, manageable kind that some people are born with and consider a gift. Traumatic cross-modal sensory integration disorder, permanent and progressive in roughly a third of cases. Overwhelming, she had said. That was the word she chose. The real experience made overwhelming sound gentle. When I was discharged and taken home, reality was unrecognizable. My mother spoke to me in the car, and her words produced curtains of shifting yellow-green light that pulsed and folded with her rhythm. The engine noise left long, rust-colored smears across my field of vision that took several seconds to dissolve. When the car turned a corner, the visual world tore sideways and took nearly 10 seconds to reassemble itself. I had to close my eyes and press my face against the headrest. At home, a dog running across the end of the street left a stroboscopic fan of copied images, 7 or 8 ghostly dogs overlapping in the space the real one had just occupied, fading one by one in reverse order. A neighbor calling out a greeting produced a clean spike of white light above his head. My mother chopping vegetables in the kitchen sounded like a percussion instrument and looked like a firework display. Every blade impact produced an orange shockwave that rippled outward across the kitchen counter and faded at the edges of my vision. My housemate Dara came to visit and could not stop crying, which I found deeply inconvenient because her tears produced cascades of silver-blue light that made it impossible to look at her face. For the first 2 months I could barely function. I could not cross a road alone. I could not watch a screen for more than a few minutes. Reading was possible only in complete silence with noise-cancelling headphones, because the sounds of a normal room turned the words on the page into a landscape of colour and movement. I took every meal sitting very still with my eyes fixed on one point, eating slowly, because the act of chewing sent vibrations through my skull that smeared the room into abstract shapes. Slowly, painfully, I adapted. I learned to trust my hands more than my eyes. I learned to walk with my gaze down and my movements deliberate. I learned to spend time in silence, which turned out to be the only reliable way to stabilize my visual field. After 4 months, I could manage most of a day without becoming completely overwhelmed. I thought I had reached the floor of it. I thought I understood the full shape of what had happened to me. I was wrong. It was a morning in autumn, about 6 months after the accident. I had managed a full week of lectures and felt, cautiously, like I was getting my life back. I was taking out the recycling, moving slowly as always, eyes on the pavement. The air had a sharpness to it that I liked. The sounds of the street, passing bikes and distant voices, produced their usual colourful residue at the edges of my sight. I had learned not to look directly at any of it. I set down the recycling box near the collection point at the end of our path. I straightened up. I glanced along the street in the automatic way you do without meaning to. And I saw it. On the far side of the street, crouching near a garden gate, was a shape that my brain filed initially as a child. Small, thin, pale, but wrong. The wrongness hit me before I had the words for it. The posture was not how a child crouches, the spine curved in the wrong direction. The limbs were too long and bent at too many points. I blinked. I looked more carefully. In my world, nothing is still. Everything moves, and everything that moves leaves a record of its movement in my vision. A ghostly fan of overlapping images that takes several seconds to dissolve. A parked car produces a slight shimmer from the engine vibration. A bird on a wire leaves a ripple when it adjusts its weight. Even my own hands, held perfectly still, produce a faint haze from the micro-movement of held breath. The shape across the street left nothing. No trace, no shimmer, no residue of any kind. In a world where even stillness bleeds colour at the edges, this thing was completely clean. It existed outside the system that governed everything else I perceived. Before I could look more carefully, it was gone. No visual echo, no movement trail pointing to where it had gone. Just the street, the garden gate, the ordinary afternoon. I told myself it was a symptom, a new kind of glitch in a brain that had already demonstrated significant creativity in generating glitches. I went back inside. I made tea. I did not think about it for the rest of the day, or at least I told myself I was not thinking about it. I saw it again 4 days later. Dara and I were walking back from the campus health centre after my routine neurological check. She was talking about something, a film she had watched, a problem with a flatmate in her seminar group. Her words produced their usual gentle colour, soft blues and violets that I had come to find almost pleasant. I was walking slowly with my eyes down, holding her arm. She stopped suddenly and I nearly walked into her. "Sorry," she said. "Pigeon." She steered me around it. I looked up to check the path ahead. It was standing about 15 feet away, near the low stone wall that borders the old part of campus. Crouching in the same asymmetrical way, that impossible curve of the spine. In the daylight I could see more of it. The skin was a dull, dark red, like sunburned flesh left untreated. Hairless. The proportions were not human, not quite. The head was too large and set at an angle that no neck should permit. "Dara," I said. My voice came out very flat and quiet. "Do you see something by that wall?" She looked. She looked for a genuine 3 or 4 seconds. "What am I looking for?" "Near the bottom of the wall, that shape." "There's just the wall. Rowan." She looked at me with the careful expression she had developed over the past 6 months, the one that was trying to be calm and not alarmed. Do you want to sit down? When I looked back at the wall, it was gone. No trace in the visual field, just stone and moss and the long shadow of the afternoon. I did not tell Dara what I had seen. I said I was tired and probably needed to eat something. She walked me home and made toast and stayed for an hour and then left. I sat in my room until it got dark. I am a scientist by training. More importantly, I am a scientist by instinct, which means that when something cannot be explained, my first move is not to panic, but to examine. I got out a notebook and I wrote down everything I had observed about the two sightings: time of day, location, duration, the specific quality of the visual impression, and the single feature that had caught my attention most sharply both times. No perceptual residue. In 14 months of living with my condition, every single thing I had ever seen had left a trail of some kind. The intensity varied, the color varied, but the trail was always there, because the trail was a product of how my brain processed incoming visual data, and my brain processed all incoming visual data the same way. There was no mechanism by which an ordinary physical object could produce no trail at all. The only explanation I could construct was that the thing I was seeing was not generating the kind of sensory signal that my brain recognized as requiring processing. It was arriving through a different channel entirely, or through no recognized channel at all. My damaged perceptual system, which had made everything in my world louder and more vivid and more present, had somehow also opened a door that no one else could see through. I was not going to write the word impossible in my notebook, but I wrote unknown and underlined it 3 times. I saw it again on the campus green in the middle of the day. I was eating lunch alone on a bench. The autumn light was warm on the grass. The sounds of other students, voices and footsteps, and the distant clatter from the canteen building produced their usual soft chromatic noise around the edges of everything. I had my earphones in at low volume, which helped flatten the visual interference enough to make eating outdoors possible. I found it when I glanced up from my food. It was perhaps 20 feet away, crouching in the shade of a large sycamore tree. Students were walking within 5 or 6 feet of it. A lecturer crossed the green not 3 feet to its left without breaking stride. A group sitting on the grass nearby were talking and laughing, and not one of them looked toward it. It was looking at me. I could see the eyes now from this distance. They were too large for the face, set wide in that elongated skull, and they were pale and very wet-looking. No eyelids that I could see. They had fixed on me with a quality that I can only describe as recognition. As I watched it, it moved, not to flee. It stood slowly, straightening to a height that did not fit with what I had seen crouching, and took 2 steps to the left. Those 2 steps left nothing, no visual trace. In the same moment, a falling leaf drifted from the sycamore and left a long waterfall of green light in its wake. I stood up from the bench. I do not know what I intended. My legs moved before I had made a decision. One of its skeletal hands rose, slowly, deliberately. It waved at me. I sat back down very hard. The bench edge caught the backs of my knees and I went down sideways onto the grass. My lunch ended up on the ground. A nearby student helped me up, asking if I was all right. Was I hurt? Did I need water? I said I was fine. I said I had slipped. I gathered my things without looking back at the tree. When I did look back on the walk home, there was nothing there. That was 3 days ago. Yesterday morning I opened my bedroom curtains. They were on the outside of the glass. Not 1, not 2. I counted 9 before I had to stop counting and step backward into the room. They were pressed against the window, against the wall, along the ledge. Different from each other in their specific details, but all sharing that same fundamental wrongness of proportion. Several of them had what I can only describe as growths along the spine, dense clusters of dark tissue that branched at the ends like dead coral. Some had calcified ridges along the skull. All of them were looking at me. All of them were completely, impossibly clean. No visual residue, no trace of movement or mass or physical presence. Just those pale, wet, lidless eyes. I shut the curtains. I checked every other window and the front door. I have been in this room since. My housemate thinks I am revising for an upcoming submission deadline. She has texted twice. I told her I am fine. I have the door locked. I do not know what they are. I do not know where they come from, or what they exist in, or what they want. What I know is this. My condition, which broke the ordinary way of seeing, also broke the filter that keeps certain things invisible. I perceive something that the undamaged brain edits out before it reaches consciousness. Whatever those things are, They exist in the gap between the signal and the interpretation, in the space where my broken wiring has accidentally left a window open. And now they know the window is there. I'm going to stop writing now. I need to save my phone battery. But before I do, if you are reading this and you have ever experienced a moment where the world seemed to bleed just slightly at the edge of something, where a shape appeared that was too sharp and too clear and too still in a world that is always moving, do not look at it directly. Do not let it understand that you have seen it. Because I looked directly. I made eye contact. I approached. And now there are no fewer than 9 of them pressed against my window in the dark, and I do not know what changes when they decide to stop waiting outside. I hope someone reads this before I find out. I wake up to the sound of 7 coins hitting the floor. That is the part that never gets easier. Not the sound of coins being dropped or scattered. There is no throw, no deliberate motion, no moment of decision. It is the sound of them releasing from my closed fist one by one, the way water drips from a tap that was never fully turned off. A clean, ringing sound, metal on hardwood, metal on tile, metal on carpet, metal on whatever surface lies beneath whatever bed I am sleeping in, as if the floor exists for no other reason than to receive them. Then the last one settles. That small final ring, every single morning. No days off. No exceptions on weekends or birthdays or the nights I spent in hospital observation rooms with sensors taped to my wrists and my chest. No exception when I sat up all night refusing to sleep until my eyes dried out and my thoughts began to fold on themselves. No exception anywhere. Not in my childhood bedroom, not in university dormitories, not in the rented flat I shared for 3 years with a woman who eventually told me, with great sadness and no real anger, that she could not live with this. At some point in the last moments before I fully wake, the coins appear in my hand, as though they have been there all night, as though my fingers had simply been keeping them warm. They fall. They land. And if I look at them directly, if I observe them with the conscious, deliberate attention of someone trying to see, they are no longer there. Not a flash or a sound or a puff of displaced air. They are simply absent, the way a word is absent when you search too hard for it. The universe closes the parenthesis and dares you to argue. The first time it happened, I was 16. My name is Mara. I had gone to bed on a perfectly unremarkable autumn evening after a perfectly unremarkable dinner, and I woke in the thin, early light to a sound I had never heard in my room before. 7 coins spread across my wooden floor, old-looking, larger than standard currency, smooth on both faces with no markings I could identify. I sat up and stared. I reached down toward them. They were gone before my fingers reached the floor. Not one remained, not a scratch on the boards, not a sound. I checked under the bed on my hands and knees. I checked inside my shoes and under the wardrobe. I sat on the edge of the mattress with my hands in my lap and my heart doing something erratic and unpleasant in my chest, and I told myself that I had still been half asleep and that the noise had been part of a dream and that the light in my room was the slightly blue light of early morning and that I was a sensible, grounded person who did not believe in nonsense. I told myself that for approximately 4 more mornings, and then I told my mother. She did not quite believe me. She also could not quite dismiss me. She knew I was not a dramatic person or an anxious one or someone who invented things for attention. She sat on the end of my bed the following morning before dawn with her arms folded and her reading glasses on, as though whatever happened would be legible if she was wearing the right lenses. She saw them. She told me later that the coins appeared in my fist without any preparatory movement, without any warning, as if they had been resting beneath my skin and simply decided to surface. She said they rolled from my fingers one by one, slowly, in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. She leaned forward to look at the faces more clearly. They were gone. She sat in silence for a long time after that. Then she said, "We will not tell your father yet." Then she said, "We will find someone who can explain this." She spent the next year finding people who could explain it. None of them could. I will not catalogue everything that was attempted. The summary is this. Doctors found nothing abnormal. Neurologists found nothing abnormal. A sleep research institute in another city paid my family a substantial sum to observe me for 6 weeks, and what they captured on camera was exactly as useless as everything else. The footage showed my sleeping hand, still and unclenching. And then an interruption in the recording that no technician could fully account for, and then 7 coins in the air above the floor, and then nothing. When the researchers tried to review the precise moment of appearance, the image broke down. The coins became pale smears. The resolution collapsed into noise. One researcher told my mother that it felt like the footage did not want to be looked at twice. By the time I was 19, I had been observed by 2 parapsychologists, a theoretical physicist who kept apologizing for being there, and a woman who described herself as a practitioner of applied symbolic theory and who left her bag of tools behind when she went, having not touched a single thing in it. Nobody explained it. Nobody stopped it. Every morning, without fail, 7 coins. Every morning, the moment of conscious attention, and then nothing. I kept records. I am not certain when it became a genuine compulsion rather than a practical habit, but somewhere in my early 20s, it had become both. I recorded the sound. I recorded the number of coins, which was always 7. I recorded whether I had managed to glimpse any face before attention dissolved them, and what that face had shown. I recorded the timing, the surface, the acoustic quality of the landing on different floors in different rooms. And I recorded a second category, what kind of day followed. Not because I believed in any direct correspondence, because I was trying to find the edges of the thing. I was trying to establish what it was adjacent to, what it rhymed with, what company it kept. After 7 years of records, I had a great deal of data and no conclusions. Then I met Jonah. Jonah was a data analyst who had come to the small architecture firm where I worked as a draftsperson to run a systems audit. He was quiet and methodical, and when I told him about the coins on our 4th evening together, expecting the familiar range of reactions from polite skepticism to performative fascination, he asked me 3 very specific questions about the data I had collected, and then said, with no drama at all, "May I look at your records sometime?" He looked at them for 3 months. I gave him full access to everything. He built new spreadsheets from my notebooks. He cross-referenced, reordered, and ran statistical models that I could follow only in their broadest outline. On a Tuesday evening, he found something. I heard him exhale sharply from the other room, the specific exhale of someone who has just confirmed a suspicion they were hoping was wrong. I was cooking. I turned the heat down and walked to the doorway of the study. He was sitting very still with both hands flat on the desk and the glow of his monitor on his face. "I think you should sit down," he said without turning around. I sat in the other chair. "Tell me." He turned the monitor toward me. The screen showed a spreadsheet dense with numbers, certain columns highlighted in pale yellow. 7 years, he said. 2,555 mornings, 17,885 individual coin faces observed, across all the instances where you caught a partial glimpse before they disappeared. I nodded. I knew all this. I stopped looking at totals, Jonah said. I started tracking individual face frequencies, how often each denomination or marking type appeared, the ones you could partially identify before they went. He paused. At the exact 7-year mark, Mara, exactly half of all observed faces show the same symbol. I felt something contract in my chest. "Half of them," I said. "Precisely half." His voice was careful and controlled in the way voices get when a person is maintaining calm by force of will. "Not approximately, not roughly, exactly, 8,942. He turned the screen a few degrees further. "And the distribution resets the following morning, as though a counter has been zeroed, as though something is tracking against a target and has just reached it." The kitchen timer I had forgotten about went off in the other room. Neither of us moved. "Jonah," I said. "I know," he said. "This was designed," I said. "Yes?" "Something is using the coins to count towards something." He closed his eyes briefly. "That is the simplest reading of the data, yes." I stood up and walked to the kitchen and turned the timer off and stood at the sink for a while looking at the wall. Then I walked back. "What is the symbol?" I asked. "It looks like a spiral," he said, "with a break in it, like a spiral that decided partway through not to complete itself." I did not say anything. "I had a theory about the frequency," Jonah said, slowly. "The number? There are relationships to certain mathematical constants, also to acoustic frequencies, specifically to a frequency range that occurs just at the upper edge of human audible perception." The word acoustic landed on me like a weight. "Don't," I said. He looked at me. "I wasn't going to play it." "Jonah, do not play it." He turned the monitor off. "I won't. I promise." I believed him. I believed him because he was careful and because he understood, intellectually, That some questions are hooks, and some hooks are baited, and some bait is intended for a specific mouth. I believed him right up until 3 days later, when I came home from work and heard a thin, high sound coming from the study that I felt in my back teeth before I heard it with my ears. I ran to the doorway. Jonah was sitting at the desk with his headphones around his neck and his face very pale and his eyes too wide, staring at the monitor. "I just wanted to verify the frequency range," he said, without looking at me. It was only for a second. The sound stopped. The silence after it was not silence. It was the shape of silence pressing against the walls of the room like water behind glass. "Are you all right?" I asked. "I don't know," he said honestly. He turned to look at me, and his expression was wrong, not frightened, not in pain, something else. Something like a person trying to remember whether they left a door unlocked, searching inward for something they expected to find and cannot locate. "I hear it," he said. "The sound stopped," I said. "No," Jonah said quietly, "not that one." His eyes went to my hand. I looked down. My fist was closed. It was 9:40 in the evening. I had never, in 16 years, had the coins appear at any time other than the moment before waking from sleep. The floor beneath my feet rang 7 times. I did not need to look. I had heard that sound 10,000 times. 7 coins, settling. The air in the room changed, not temperature, pressure, the particular quality of pressure that is not physical and cannot be measured, but that the body understands as the attention of something enormous swinging toward it. Then the room was not the room. Darkness. The kind that has texture, that presses against the open eyes without being seen. I raised my hand and could not see it. I spoke my own name and heard nothing. Not silence in the absence of sound, but silence as a presence, as a medium, as the element this place was made of. Behind me 7 coins. Not falling, being shaken, cupped in a hand much larger than mine, and turned over and over with the patient rhythm of something that has been waiting for a very long time. I spun around. The sound stayed behind me. I spun again, behind me. Every direction I faced, behind me, as if behind was not a direction here but a fixed point, a pole, and I was the needle rotating around it. Then words. Not in any language I had heard. Sounds that did not behave like language, that carried more meaning than the container of sound should hold, that tried to pour themselves into my mind and could not fit. The pressure of them was physical. My ears ached. The base of my skull ached. My vision, despite the total darkness, produced light at the edges, jagged and involuntary. I dropped to my knees. The words continued. I pressed my hands over my ears. It did not help. The sounds were arriving through bone, through skin, through whatever surface the body presents to the world. Then they stopped, and a voice said in English that was clean and cold and correct in every phoneme, "There you are." Out of the dark, something assembled itself. Not light, not movement, presence the way a smell can announce a room before you enter it. My mind built an outline without being given enough information to justify one, filling in what the eyes could not supply. It was very large, wider than tall. Its surface looked like pale stone that had been worked by water over centuries, pocked and channeled, the texture of something that has existed long enough for time to leave marks. It had no clear neck. Its shape above the shoulders was approximately where a head would be placed, but was not a head in any way I could map to familiarity. It had many hands. They extended from a region that might have been its back or its sides, stacked and layered, reaching behind it in a progression of lengths so that the longest disappeared into the dark at a distance I could not estimate. The hands were still. They did not move, but they communicated the impression of something with a very large reach and no particular urgency about demonstrating it. Its face, to the extent that it had one, was covered in eyes. They were pale gold. Their pupils were long and horizontal. They did not move in coordination. Each turned independently, and the collective motion of them had the quality of static, of a signal trying to resolve. Where its mouth would have been was an opening that did not look like a mouth. It looked like an opening in the sense that a fissure in the ground is an opening. Dark in a way that was not the absence of light, but the presence of something else. From that opening, at intervals, a substance fell that could not decide what it was, not liquid, not light, both and neither. "I have been looking at you for some time," the voice said. "From my side, through the coins." My hands were trembling. I pressed them flat against what was beneath me, which felt like nothing specific, which felt like intention shaped into a surface. "What are you?" I asked. Every eye adjusted. Not toward me, the motion was too distributed for that, but a quality of the room shifted, the way attention shifts. A word that would not survive translation. It said, "I will not insult you with an approximation. What do you want with me?" "The coins are a thread," it said, "the only kind thin enough to pass between my existence and yours without tearing the membrane. Chance, you call it. Randomness. Your species has built an entire relationship with the concept. Games, rituals, superstition. You have been worshipping it without knowing what it is for 16 years. "I haven't been worshipping anything," I said. "You have been recording," it said, "counting, looking for meaning. That is a form of prayer, and the coins have been counting back. The 7-year mark, 8,942 spirals, a counter reaching a target." "What happens now that it is counted?" I asked, because I needed something to push against. The eyes moved, not in unison, but in a wave, a slow ripple from one side of the face to the other. "Now," it said, "you have been prepared." Prepared for what? To carry something back. The darkness above me changed. I was not asked to look. Looking was simply what happened, the way falling happens when support is removed. My eyes went up. The dark opened. There were no adequate words for what was there. Stars in the ordinary sense, but arranged in patterns that moved, that had intention, that were not configurations of dead light, but of something active and ongoing. Between them, shapes, not ships, not creatures in any sense borrowed from biology. Forms of a size that made the word large meaningless, that required new vocabulary I did not have. They occupied the spaces between galaxies, the way objects occupy rooms, casually, as things that belong there. One of them, at the far edge of what I could perceive, was vaguely antler-shaped, something vast and branched and slow, drifting through a region of cold light like a creature that has never needed to move quickly and knows it. I looked for as long as I could, and then I stopped looking, not because I was told to, but because something in my chest was beginning to give in a way I recognized as the beginning of a response I could not afford. "My kind," the voice said, "exists in relation to yours the way weather exists in relation to insects. We are not opposed to you. We are not interested in you. We pass through your world when our movements require it. Sometimes those passages leave marks." "Disasters," I said. "Events," it said, "without effect. Your planet has recorded several of our transits as extinction-level events. We did not notice them. We do not notice most things at your scale." I pressed my hands harder against the floor. "Then why me?" I said. "Why any of this?" "Because," the voice said, with something that was not patience and was not impatience, but was a long, cool middle ground, "one of my brethren has taken an interest in your part of the membrane, and I was sent to find the point of weakness. The place where the thread had been running long enough to make a gap." "I'm a gap," I said. "You are a door," it said, "if I wished." I thought of Jonah. I thought of the headphones around his neck and the pale face and the sound I had heard from the doorway. I thought of what he had said. "I hear it, not the sound from the monitor, not that one." "My friend," I said, "what did you do to him?" The eyes shifted again, that slow wave. "He is sleeping," it said. "He will wake." The tone was not meant for him. He took a smaller piece of it, and it has simply displaced him for a time. "And me? You were given the full thread 16 years ago. You have been hearing the tone since your first morning. You simply could not hear the frequency of it until now." I thought about every morning, the coins, the floor, the moment of attention that dissolved them, not a mystery, not a malfunction. A 16-year conversation I had been present for without understanding the language. Something inside me shifted from fear into a colder register. "What do you actually need from me?" I said. The many hands held still until now made a small motion, not threatening, the way a person might incline their head. "A door does not need to know it is being used," it said. "This was a courtesy. I do not often extend courtesy." "Then why did you?" I said. A pause, long enough that I wondered if time operated differently here. "Because you counted," it said, finally. "Because you wrote everything down. Because you treated a mystery with seriousness instead of discarding it or worshipping it. That is rare. Rare enough that I wished to look at the specimen directly." "I am not a specimen," I said. The voice said nothing. "If you use me as a door," I said, "what comes through?" "Nothing." "What has already come through?" I asked. The darkness above shifted. "Look to your east," the voice said. 300 miles. I did not know what that meant in this place, but my mind supplied an image with the helpfulness of a brain that has run out of better options. A city, a coastline, something I had seen on a news feed 2 weeks ago and filed away without fully processing because the footage had been irregular and the explanations contradictory. Unexplained collapse, hundreds dead, cause unknown. That was not your passage, I said. It was not a question. No, the voice said. That was my brethren, testing your membrane at a softer point. I sat with that for as long as I could. Is there anything I can do to close the door? I said. The eyes stilled, all of them simultaneously for the first time. No, it said, there is not. Then why tell me any of this? The voice came from closer now, though it had not moved. Because, it said, knowing changes nothing about the outcome, and I find the moment of knowing interesting to observe. The expression of comprehension in a species that believed itself alone. That is why. Something broke in me quietly, the way ice breaks in spring, without drama, with only the faint sound of a structure releasing. We are not alone, I said. We are observed, and we are nothing to the things observing us. You are not nothing, the voice said, and its tone was almost careful. You are temporary. There is a difference. Even temporary things leave marks on what surrounds them. Even a small thread changes the tension of the cloth. I did not know if that was meant to be comfort or simply information. I decided it did not matter. Will I remember this? I asked. Yes, it said. Will anyone believe me? No, it said. Will it happen again? Every morning, it said, until the count is complete. And when the count is complete, I said. The darkness began to change around the edges. I was being returned. When the count is complete, the voice said. From a distance now, receding, another thread begins. I was lying on the study floor. The monitor was off. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall said 3:47 in the morning. Jonah was on the floor beside me, on his back, breathing, asleep or something close enough to it that the difference was academic. His hands were loose and open, the posture of someone without current worries. I sat up slowly. My body had the quality of something that has been held for a long time in an unusual position. My ears were tender. My eyes ached. I sat against the base of the desk and looked at the ceiling for a while. Then I pulled Jonah's laptop onto my lap and opened a new document and began to type. I am not doing this because it will help. I am not doing it because I believe it will be believed. I am doing it because the voice was right about one thing. Knowing changes the expression on a face. And that change is real even when everything else is beyond influence. The coins will come tomorrow morning. They will come the morning after, for as many mornings as remain. Some counter somewhere, in a place that does not have a name in any language I speak, will advance by one. 7 spirals, settling. A thread pulled a fraction tighter, and something on the other side of the membrane will watch the number rise. You cannot stop it, but I want you to know it is happening. I want you to know that the coins, or the cards, or the feathers, or whatever small impossible thing appears in your hands in the grey light before you fully wake, whatever thing you have been recording and counting and trying to find the pattern in, whatever mystery has become your roommate, your companion, the thing you explain away every single morning, it is not random. It was never random. It is a thread, and on the other end of it, something very large is holding the spool. The only advice I have is this: do not pull. But if you have already pulled, if the thread is already taut, if the frequency has already found the inside of your skull and started making itself comfortable, write it down anyway. It will not save you. But something vast, in a place without light, might decide you were worth a second look. And in the cosmology I now understand, second looks are the closest thing to mercy on offer. The first thing I found was a heartbeat. Not mine. It lived somewhere deep in my chest, slow and deliberate, like a machine running through a calibration sequence, testing its own rhythm, measuring itself against some internal standard I could not access. I had nothing else, no sight, no sound, no smell, only the faint mineral taste of something cold and gritty resting on what I assumed was still a tongue. Then a feeling. Not heard. Felt. A dry, precise movement along what I thought might be my spine, like a series of small plates shifting against each other, like something folding and unfolding its wings in a space that was not made for wings. I should have been afraid. There was not enough of me present to generate fear. I was awareness without context, a signal that had not yet found its receiver. I was there. That was all I could say with any confidence. There was no pain. Pain requires contrast, A before that was comfortable, and an after that is not. I had no before. I had only this. A loose, uncertain consciousness threaded through a body I could not fully sense, and within that body, something else. Something that was not me. It was moving through the architecture of my nerves the way a hand moves through tall grass, gently, with curiosity rather than purpose, pressing here, testing there, checking tension and resistance the way an engineer checks a structure before committing weight to it. The next thing I found was orientation. Down. A constant patient pull in one direction, gravity or something that functioned like it. I could feel it working against certain parts of me and not others, which meant that certain parts of me were being held in place by something that was not muscle. I was not lying. I was not standing. I was slumped in a way that bodies do not slump on their own. I was being held up. After orientation came breathing. I was not doing it. Something was doing it for me. I could feel the mechanism, a pulling and releasing of my diaphragm that was slightly too regular, slightly too shallow, the way an automatic process mimics a biological one without fully understanding the reason for it. The air that moved through me was dry. It had a quality like the air in a room that has been sealed for a long time, not stale exactly, but dense, as if the oxygen in it had been sitting so still it had begun to settle. Then it stopped. The thing inside me simply ceased working my diaphragm. Not deliberately, I thought. More like a distraction had pulled its attention elsewhere, and it had not yet understood that the interruption mattered. I felt the pressure build, the deep cellular urgency of a body running low on what it needs. The panic came slowly, like a wave that has traveled a great distance and arrives with all the weight of the journey behind it. Then it started again. Pull, push. After a moment, sound. It arrived muffled, the way sound arrives when you are submerged, pressure flattened, and arriving from no clear direction. Then it sharpened. The shifting of plates along my back, an echo from somewhere close, hard surfaces, metal, industrial, a room with no soft materials to absorb sound. Then other things. A slow, wet drag somewhere below me, a rhythmic sound that was not mechanical and not biological, and that I could not place. Somewhere at a distance, electrical systems cycling up from dormancy, fans struggling against long disuse, wiring conducting current it had not been asked to carry in some time. And beneath all of it, a faint crackling. Something organic. Then, a sensation in my throat. Something moving through it. Not the swallowing motion of normal function, but something deliberate. Something entering or exiting. The reflex to gag moved through me and arrived at nothing. My body did not respond to its own signals. Then my abdomen opened. I felt it the way you feel something you cannot believe is happening, with a delay between sensation and understanding. Something had given way. Fluid ran outward from the split, warm, then cooling rapidly, tracing a path down my leg and pooling somewhere below. The thing inside me reacted immediately. Every string was pulled at once. My entire body convulsed in a single, uncoordinated jerk. For a moment I felt something that did not belong to me, a response that was adjacent to panic, quick and disorganized. Nothing like the cold, methodical movement it had shown until now. Something urgent had entered its behavior. Then it went to work. I felt the tendrils rethread themselves through my abdomen, slow and precise, the torn lining pulled back toward itself, held, sealed. The work took time, and the whole of that time I existed inside it, aware of every adjustment, unable to affect any of them. When it finished, the smell arrived. Metal and antiseptic first, then the older layers beneath those, stagnant air, cold surfaces that had held moisture for too long, and under everything, a sweetness that was not pleasant, organic and thick, and belonging to things that had progressed past the point of recovery. Memory came with the smell. Not in order, not coherently, in the way memories arrive under sedation, without context or sequence, each fragment lit brightly and then gone. The loading bay, a cargo manifest, the particular quality of light in the observation corridor during a long transit, the way it shifted over hours, tracking some unseen cycle. The platform door closing. The sound of a hull under stress. Cold. Then nothing. We had been transiting between stations, a long commercial run, crew of 11, routine work. The navigational system had registered an anomaly in the transit corridor seconds before we lost control of the approach. Something had intersected our path. We had not been able to correct in time. After that, only fragments. A bulkhead tearing open. a sound I could not describe. Then the dark. We had died. I understood that now with a clarity that arrived quietly and without drama, the way certain truths arrive when the mind is too reduced to fight them. We had been dead. The question still assembling itself in whatever part of me remained capable of questions was, for how long? Then light. Not sudden, gradual. The slow return of a sense that had been absent long enough that its arrival felt like an event. Colors arrived before shapes. The orange flicker of emergency lighting, the grey of metal walls, pale surfaces coated in something I could not immediately identify. My vision cleared in pieces. The first coherent thing I saw was a body on the far side of the room. I knew the work uniform, dark grey with the station's operational insignia at the breast pocket. I knew the hands, the specific pattern of small burns along the right forearm from a maintenance job done years ago without adequate shielding. I knew the ring. The abdomen had been opened, the rib cage was visible, the organs had swollen. I was looking at myself. The understanding arrived in the same quiet, declarative way that the understanding of my death had arrived, without theatrics, without the luxury of a scream. That was my body. I was not in it. I was in something else. I was seeing through something else's eyes. Then the room expanded around me. The medical bay had been a clean space once. I could see the structure of what it had been, the equipment bays, the cryogenic units, the organized rows of emergency stations. Now the cryogenic units were shattered open, their seals broken from within or from without. The floor held pools of coolant and something thicker. Between the broken equipment, structures had grown, organic and architectural at once. Webs of material that were neither quite living nor quite manufactured, towers of clustered growth that pulsed faintly in the emergency light. And across the floor, across the walls, over and through the ruins, the creatures. Small, many-limbed, each carrying a hard-shelled structure on their backs that opened and closed in plates, producing the dry, clicking sound I had been feeling since I first became aware. They moved between the bodies on the floor, with the focused attention of workers engaged in a job they understood completely. They were repairing them. Each body I could see was in some state of work, tendrils threading closed what had been opened, limbs being flexed and tested, the methodical restoration of function to things that no longer had any functional need. I watched several of the crew members I recognized from our transit, people I had worked beside for the better part of 2 years, each of them held in the same state I was in, inhabited, maintained, operated. Then my own body stood up. It rose from the floor with the particular quality of movement that belongs to things being moved rather than things choosing to move. Arms rising from the shoulder, legs finding their balance through a series of small corrections. The creature on my back adjusted its grip as the posture changed, its plates briefly flaring, and I saw it clearly for the first time. It sat along my spine like something that had decided my vertebrae made a reasonable perch. Its shell was segmented and pale, the color of old bone. Its eyes were small and numerous, and they held absolutely no expression, not because they communicated neutrality, but because expression simply did not exist in them. They were sensors. They looked outward without commentary. The tendrils disappeared into my back in a dozen places. I felt them from this side too, from inside the creature whose eyes I was borrowing, the sensation of them connecting, the feedback, the data passing both ways along those thin threads. The anger came slowly. Not the hot, immediate anger of pain or surprise, the other kind, the kind that builds from the bottom, from something that has had time to settle and compress, and become something close to structural. That was my body, my hands, my face, my 11 years of accumulated experience in transit logistics, my mother's handwriting on birthday cards, my ability to sleep through almost anything, my unfortunate habit of humming while working, my 2 remaining years on the station contract, my plans for after. And something had crawled inside it and decided it was a useful mechanism and set it walking. Then the voices came. First one, then several, broken and uncertain, arriving from throats that had not produced sound in a very long time. Where is this? I cannot move my hands. Something is in my back. Is anyone there? And somehow I answered, not through my own body, through the one I was currently occupying. We are all here, I said, and the words arrived in a woman's voice, someone else's cadence, someone else's register. The room filled briefly with the sound of waking minds, a dozen people all discovering simultaneously the shape of their situation, the horror of it, the specific cruelty of being present inside something you cannot direct. For a moment we were connected. I could feel the edges of the others, their fear, their disorientation, their attempts to move against their own stillness. Then the creatures stopped. Every one of them. The room went quiet in a way that rooms do not usually go quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the cessation of it, everything halting simultaneously. The creatures held their positions and waited. Then they began again, but differently. The tendrils that had been threading through my borrowed body, the borrowed eyes and borrowed voice I had been using to perceive the room, drew inward. I felt them moving through the tissue of the skull, through the finer architecture of the mind, probing the places where the waking thoughts had been. One by one, the other voices receded. Not silenced, moved further away, set behind some barrier I could feel but could not locate. The connection that had briefly existed between us was being disassembled with the same quiet precision that had reassembled our bodies. I tried to speak again. Nothing. I tried to move a single finger. Nothing. I existed fully and I could affect nothing. The body I had been seeing through stood, and I felt the motion from the inside, felt the parasite adjusting its weight across my borrowed spine, felt the system resume operation as if there had been no interruption. We were not gone. We were simply no longer a factor in our own function. I have tried to understand what they are, in the long time since the room, in the unchanging forward movement through corridors and tasks, and the continued operation of a vessel that should have been decommissioned long ago. I have had time to observe. They do not communicate in any way I can identify. They do not appear to have a social structure. They work continuously and without apparent fatigue on problems that present themselves, organic problems, structural problems, functional problems. They fix what is broken. That appears to be the totality of their purpose. I do not think they understood that we were conscious. I think they found machinery that had stopped functioning and they repaired it. I think what happened when we woke, the voices, the connections, the brief collective panic of 11 people discovering their situation simultaneously, was an unexpected result that their repair work had produced. And I think, when they realized the machinery was now generating an internal process they had not accounted for, they adjusted for it, the way you would adjust for any unexpected output. Efficiently, without hostility, without malice. I have no malice toward them either. I found it once in the early period, that long, compressed anger. It has since resolved into something quieter. They are not cruel. They are simply so far outside the framework of cruelty and kindness that neither concept applies. They found broken things and fixed them. The fact that the things they fixed had been people is a category they were not equipped to consider. I think about the crew sometimes, whether they are still in there, wherever I am in there, whether the others found some accommodation with their situation, or whether they exist in the same sustained, exhausted presence I occupy. There is no way to know. The barrier holds. The vessel moves through transit corridors. It was never meant to travel. The creatures tend their systems. The bodies they repaired carry out functions whose purpose I have mostly given up trying to understand. And somewhere inside the mechanism, behind the adjustment the creatures made to ensure that the waking minds would not interfere, I am still here. Not as anything functional, not as anything that matters to the operation. Just here, watching from inside the machine. Waiting for something that I have no particular reason to believe will come,